Good morning. It is an honor to be here today with so many passionate, driven leaders from across the nonprofit sector. Thank you, Dorothy, Keeley, and team for all of the great work you do every day to support nonprofit leaders and improve the work of our sector. I lead an organization called JobsFirstNYC. It is a workforce intermediary that helps communities by developing, testing, and scaling economic solutions. We work across sectors, government, nonprofit, philanthropy, private sector employers, about 200 plus institutions to collaborate on increasing economic opportunities. As we gather to discuss how the social sector must evolve to increase our impact, I want to frame our conversation with a simple but powerful idea. Don't dictate the finish line. Translate culture to develop solutions. Let that thought sink in for a moment. In many ways, the work we do in mission-driven organizations often involves setting a vision for what success looks like. We want to see the world change, where issues of equity, justice, and opportunity are no longer barriers, but catalysts for progress. We set ambitious goals, and we work tirelessly to get there. We define success. We define what success should look like. But here's some questions I want us to wrestle with today. What if in our pursuit of solutions, we are sometimes imposing our own finish lines on the very communities we aim to serve, on the systems we aim to change? What if, in our desire to bring about change, we overlook the power of cultural context? What if, in the ways investors dictate solutions, and we know sometimes they do, in the way our institutions operate, we undervalue community input and community-led solutions? So let's be honest. As nonprofit leaders, we often come with the best of intentions. We identify a problem, we craft a solution, and then begin implementing our strategies. We define success, believing that if we build a solution, people will come. And often, when they don't come, we point our fingers at them because it's their fault, and we often do not look at ourselves. The truth is, success isn't ours to define alone. And I'll say that again. Success isn't ours to define alone. It belongs to those we serve, people whose very existence is why our sector exists, why we have jobs we're doing today. The people we serve should help to co-design their solutions. So let's look at the lessons from history. And let me illustrate this with a story, one that might sound strange at first, but bear with me. In the 1950s, villages in Borneo suffered a malaria outbreak. Here's what happened next.
In the 1950s, the Dayak people of Borneo, an island in Southeast Asia, were suffering from an outbreak of malaria, so they called the World Health Organization for help. The World Health Organization had a ready-made solution, which was to spray copious amounts of DDT around the island. With the application of DDT, the mosquitoes that carried the malaria were knocked down, and so was the malaria. There were some interesting side effects, though. The first was that the roofs of people's houses began to collapse on their heads. Turns out the DDT not only killed off the malaria-carrying mosquitoes, but it also killed a species of parasitic wasps that had controlled a population of thatch-eating caterpillars. Thatch being what the roofs of the Dayak people's homes were made from. Without the wasps, the caterpillars multiplied and flourished and began munching their way through the villagers' roofs. That was just the beginning. The DDT affected a lot of the island's other insects, which were eaten by the resident population of small lizards called geckos. The biological half-life of DDT is around 8 years, so animals like geckos do not metabolize it very fast. It stays in their system for a long time. Over time, the geckos began to accumulate pretty high levels of DDT, and while they tolerated the DDT fairly well, the island's resident cats, which dined on the geckos, did not. The cats ate the geckos, and the DDT contained in the geckos killed the cats. With the cats gone, the island's population of rats came out to play. We all know what happens when rats multiply and flourish. Pretty soon, the Dayak people were back on the phone to the World Health Organization, only this time it wasn't malaria that was the problem. It was the plague and the destruction of their grain stores, both of which were caused by the overpopulation of rats. This time, though, the World Health Organization didn't have a ready-made solution and had to invent one. What did they do? They decided to parachute live cats into Borneo. Operation Cat Drop occurred courtesy of the Royal Air Force and eventually stabilized the situation.
So why is this important? Why does this matter? Because it's a classic example of a well-intended intervention that ignored local systems, ultimately causing unintended harm. How often do we as nonprofit leaders create our own cat drop, solutions designed with good intentions, but without deep cultural translation? How do we ensure that our solutions don't just solve problems on the surface, but empower people, respect their agency, and truly transform our institutions? It starts with not dictating the finish line. There's power in translating culture to develop solutions. Cultural understanding isn't a nice to have, it's a necessity. But translating culture isn't about assimilating people into our worldview. It's about stepping into theirs. When we dictate the finish line, we often assume we know better than the people we seek to help. We impose external expectations, often without truly understanding community values and lived realities. But no one knows better than those living the problem day in and day out. So our job isn't to tell the people and communities we serve what success looks like. It is to help remove the barriers that prevent them from defining it for themselves. And I'll repeat that. Our job isn't to tell the people and communities we serve what success looks like. It's to help remove the barriers that prevent them from defining it for themselves. So when we dictate the finish line, we also stifle new ideas. We limit innovation, sometimes by holding on to outdated institutional models, rather than making space for fresh ideas. To develop solutions that truly make an impact, we must find and build relationships that allow us to translate culture into solutions. How does this community define success? What are their values? How do those values inform their decisions? How does our institutions create space for staff to write new rules, develop solutions, and have the flexibility to innovate? How might our institutional, personal, and cultural beliefs affect how we value or not value the input from those we serve? But what do we do now? What are some practical actions we can take? Well, it's not that hard. Shift how we solve problems. Let's co-create solutions rooted in culture and context of the people we serve. Embrace humility. We don't have all the answers. That's not a weakness. It's a strength. True transformation happens when we honor the wisdom of lived experience. Let's redefine success. We often measure success in ways that don't reflect long-term impact. Are our solutions truly sustainable? Do we have the benchmarks for those? Are we empowering people to shape their own future? Do we have benchmarks for those? For all the leaders here today, I challenge you to break the status quo. What would it look like if we stop dictating the finish line? The shift won't happen overnight, and it won't be easy, but it is necessary. We cannot keep operating under the old models that haven't worked. Examine your white spaces. What questions are you not asking yourselves? Where are the opportunities you may be missing? The pipeline to poverty is well built, operational at scale, and thriving. But the pipeline out of poverty is fragmented, fragile, and often fails those who need it the most. What are we willing to break to disrupt that pipeline? We must question the systems upholding the status quo, but we must also question our institutions upholding the status quo, because those institutions are also part of that larger system. We can no longer be comfortable with the framework we have inherited. So I challenge you, recognize that we do need a new social contract. We need a new social contract to break this pipeline to poverty. We need a new social contract that recognizes that all things aren't equal, like all wages aren't equal. People may need supplemental help to supplement those lower wages. What are we willing to break to disrupt the poverty pipeline? Ask, what does a revolutionary change look like in the social solution space? In our sector, we tinker around the edges. Understandably, people's lives depend on what we do. But we should feel uncomfortable with the status quo. And all of us here know what the status quo look like. What do you want to revolutionize in your work? Start with you, with what you do and how you do it. What do you want to revolutionize in your work? As we close today, I challenge you. What are you willing to break to disrupt the pipeline from poverty? Are you ready to lead a revolution in how we think about social solutions? Just remember, the finish line is not ours to dictate. It's up to the communities and the people we serve to define it. Thank you for your commitment to change. Let's build a new world together.